Are you ready for the weekend yet? We have events, news, and a guest for you to enjoy this Lake Life weekend. Hello and welcome to another episode of Lake Life Weekend Podcast. I'm Dirk and I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in to this weekend 10 approaching, and it's gonna be warm. We're gonna have water, snow melting and ice getting thinner. I believe there's no fish houses left on the lakes, and spring feels like it has sprung. So great, I'm in a good mood, as you can hear. Thank you for tuning in. And this week we have a special program from the DNR. We are very fortunate to have such a good relationship with Nate Olsen, who comes for the third time to us to record a Minnesota DNR fishery update. And this time he brought a new team member, Nick Clute, from the office in Becker County, and we learn about the recent fish stories they have in our local area, but also a very, very interesting program and a study that Nick is spearheading on the Red River about catfish and technology and really, really interesting things about the work of the DNR in our area. So stay tuned for that. Go to our website, lakelifeweekend.com, for more stories, updates, and also please don't forget that our Lake Life season kickoff party is coming. Presented to you from Choice Bank on March 20th. Thank you for our sponsors. There's a whole bunch, a big list. Go to explorelakelife.com and you will find the complete program on our special party night. Doors open at 5. We have music live on stage at 6. Crop dusters, a pre-show. And then we also have a beanbag tournament presented to you by Grain Designs. We have a disc golf challenge. And then we have a food court. We have a Fargo Brewing Company release party. Lots of things. And our main act live on stage is going to be Tripwire at 8 p.m. So we hope to see you in Fargo on March 20th in a couple of weeks. Starting at 5 p.m. for our Lake Life season kickoff party. Everything online as well. Well, I don't want to keep this much longer from our interview part about the DNR Fishery Update 2020. Thanks again for tuning in. Feel free to email me to hello@lakelifeweekend.com with ideas and any sorts of suggestions. And now to our interview part. Thank you. Have a great weekend ahead. Welcome to our interview part. I'm here with the DNR and with Nathan Olsen and Nick Clute. This is the third time I am able to do a fishery report, fishery update. And Nathan came in our first year, in our second, and now in our third year. And he brought Nick as the newest member to the Becker County DNR office, I understand. And he will give us a little insight about Red River and the science of the water streams. And you, Nathan, decided to, came prepared to give us an update on the recent past and then on what's happening this summer locally with the fish. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming, and then you introduce yourself in a little bit. And Nathan, why don't we just jump right in?
Yeah, so it has been a little bit since we've been here, and so I just wanted to kind of recap what happened this last year, kind of work through the season a little bit. Usually in the spring it starts with our walleye egg take, and so I'm sure many people have been down to Dutton Locks.
At Melissa,
Yep.
Sally.
It's between Sally and Muskrat there at the county park. And we had a great egg take this last spring. One change that people might see coming up this next spring is we do have a different dock system. So for many years we built that dock out of wood.
Yeah, I saw.
And so
yeah,
so it's very old and reminiscent of olden days when you see that. We've kind of upgraded that now to a more of a floating plastic kind of aluminum style dock, and so we do have our work cut out for us this year to try to get that put into place and figured out how that's going to work. But I think it's going to be way faster and easier for us to put together than to screw all that wood in place.
Hopefully also safer.
And hopefully safer, yep. It's a bigger platform, so there's less chance of people falling off. It rarely happens that someone falls, but it has happened before. And so hopefully with a little bit bigger platform, we got a little bit more room to work. So,
if I may ask real quick, because I've been there with my son, and I think it's a great event. It's almost a family event. The community comes and watches you. It's usually like I think a 2-3 day span, and it's always at a certain time after ice melt, or right?
Yeah, I mean our average start time is around the middle of April, so maybe April 17th, but it has gone as early as the end of March, and so it could be in 1 month if all of a sudden spring comes early, like the groundhog says it may.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yes, then we could be out there working already. So
awesome.
We hope that it only takes us like a week to get it done. But there has been times where it's been 2 weeks that we've been sitting there just because the weather's been weird and the fish aren't present, and it just takes us longer to get our quota for eggs.
And a question, like how many people are involved? Like how many people help? Is it
usually the magic number is probably around 7 people on the platform. Basically, a lot of people think, well, more is better, but a lot of times it just gets to be too many people out there and moving around. And
right.
So at least with the old platform in the dock system, it was about 7 people. So usually we try to keep it to that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So we had a great egg take, which led to meeting our quotas for Walleye Fry, so we have a hatchery there, so we hatch those. They turn into fry, which are about the size of a mosquito. And then we stock those into lakes, or we stock those into small wetlands, which we call rearing ponds.
There's some by your offices.
Yeah, so we've got them spread out all in Clay County, Becker County, kind of all over the place. We operate about 30 ponds. And so when fall rolls around, those fish have been in there growing almost all summer, and then in fall we go back to those ponds to harvest those we call them fingerlings by then. Yep. So they're about 5 to 6 inches long by that time, and we had a great year for that too last fall. We stocked over 5,500 pounds of fish, which is about 220,000 fish total. So
it's over 2 tons.
Yeah. So we usually work with in pounds when we try to do quotas and stuff, but people are like, well, how many fish is that? And so it's about 220,000 fish that we actually stocked in different lakes around the area.
As fingerlings or as fingerlings and fry?
Just as fingerlings. So
really?
That number is just in fingerlings. If you're talking fry, we're talking millions. Yes.
No kidding.
Yep. So
only in Becker County?
Becker, Clay. My work area goes all the way up to Polk and Red Lake County. So we have a suite of lakes. I have basically 5 or 6 counties that we manage water bodies.
5 or 6.
Yep.
So our head office here is not just Becker; it's
north.
It
goes north. So we have a different office in Fergus Falls, and they handle Ottertail County. And so we're kind of at the southern end of our work area. So we kind of go all the way over to the North Dakota border, and then all the way up to almost Grand Forks, basically.
Oh, really?
Yep. So if we to the furthest point of my work area, it easily could be about 2-hour drive.
Is that Lake of the Woods then already?
No.
Oh,
then that's Baudette. They've got a whole nother office up there then that kind of takes on the Pennington and other counties to the north of there.
So 220,000 fingerlings.
Fish. Yep.
And you deliver them in tanks and plastic bags like when I go to the pet shop?
No, we have large transport tanks. If you're talking fry though, we do have basically, if anyone sees those collapsible water jugs, plastic collapsible water jugs that you take camping, we use those to fill with fry and shoot them with oxygen and water, and we take those to transport the fish around.
And then you dump 1
Yeah,
gallon of fry into each lake?
So if it's a small quota where it's only like 70,000 fry, then it might be just 1 bag that we put in.
Interesting.
If you're talking a bigger water body like Height of Land, which is over 3,000 acres, then you're talking millions of fry, and then it might be 20 bags that you got to take out there.
Okay.
So,
but
a very interesting process.
Yeah. But we had a good harvest in 19.
Yes, and so really what kind of dictates whether we have a good walleye pond season like that is whether we have good winters, because then basically the fish winter kill and we start over, so we start fresh in those ponds, so there's no competition for other food or anything like that. And so it's looking like this winter is going to be good again to produce some winter kill in those ponds, and then we can start over. It's just basically, imagine it like a farm field where instead of having all these weeds out there that you're competing against, it's a fresh field that you can start over with, and you have a better chance of getting a better take on the fish that we stock.
Interesting.
Yep.
So we want all the previous fish to
be gone?
be gone?
We want all the previous fish to be gone. Some of our ponds do have other fish like crappies and bluegills and things like that, and so it's great if we can get those out of the ponds as well and just start over.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Besides that, during the summer, we do a number of different surveys, and we have about 20 different surveys that we've got to get written this winter.
Only 20.
Only 20.
The netting, like it was part of the netting. In
Yep,
the fall.
that's netting, or doing shoreline surveys, or some little backpack shocking, electroshocking, looking for small fish. And that was on 24 different lakes, so we covered a decent number of lakes this last summer. And that really is what we kind of tackle all winter, is we basically collect data like crazy during the winter or during the summer when we can, and then during the winter, then we're just writing up those plans and those surveys, to get ready for the next year. So kind of looking at the next year, one thing I do want to let people know is there's been some press out there that we're looking at some additional bluegill regulations, and so, or sunnies as people like to call them. Okay. And so really the impetus for all this is we've done some surveys of anglers, and they're happy with the number of fish that they're catching. They're just not that thrilled about the size. And so we're hearing a lot of people saying that they wish that the fish were bigger. And one way to do that, Dirk, is to try to limit the number of fish that anglers can keep. And so right now, if you don't have any special regs on your lake, you can go out and you can catch 20 bluegills in a day. And that's your possession limit as well. Unfortunately, the research says you've got to get down to about 5 fish per day in order to really move the needle and make the bluegill population to be better. And so that is what we are looking at and we'll be proposing for this next coming year, is a 5 fish limit on a few lakes in Becker County per day. So it's a big jump. It's going from 20 to 5. But we do have research that shows that as you use that regulation, you do see bigger sunfish in your lake over time. Of course, it's not going to happen, like the next year or anything like that.
Patience, huh?
Yep, it might take 5 or 10 years, or maybe even 20 on some lakes. It just depends on the water body and what's going on with it. So I just wanted to get that out there so that people, basically what will happen is, if we get the blessing through our commissioner's office and stuff, then this spring you'll start seeing yellow signs on certain lakes that will say this is being proposed for a special bluegill regulation. And then there'll be a public comment period and a public meeting later this fall.
Already for 2020.
Yep.
And then in fall,
so
it will
then,
be
so
put
if,
in place.
and if everything goes good and everything goes like it should, then it would be in place for 2021 fishing opener.
But the key word, I think, is that you didn't come up with that rule. You were actually listening to the anglers, to the fishermen, saying like, "Hey, we would like to." So you were getting information, input, and it's like, "Okay, we heard you. In order for us to succeed, we need to limit so that they can grow." So we're not just making rules.
No, we are. It's funny because that survey says they weren't happy with the size, but they weren't quite ready to just do a whole statewide limit reduction from 20 to 5. Because some people would say, well, why don't we just make the whole state a 5 fish limit? Well, the anglers weren't quite ready to go that far, and so the area supervisors were tasked with looking at certain lakes in their management area and asked what lakes would this make the most sense to put on, this regulation on. And so we're kind of still working through which lakes we might use, but once we kind of get that figured out, hopefully they won't be surprised then that they see these signs, because if for some reason it gets hung up and all of a sudden the commissioner signs it, and now we're running around putting signs up, it could be a surprise to some people when they come to the access and see this yellow sign that says, hey, this thing's going to go from a 20 fish limit to 5 fish limit. Which again is a big change, but the research does show that's what it takes if you want to see bluegills up to 10 inches. So
cool.
So and then
good to know.
Some other stuff that's going to be happening, and that's why I wanted to bring Nick here today, was Nick is our new Red River fishery specialist, and we have a ton of stuff that's going on in the Red River this year, and I just wanted to kind of pass it on to him so he can share with what's going on and keep it all straight, because I can't remember all of it either. So
introduce yourself just a tiny little bit, Nick. You're new to the DNR?
Yeah, I'm new to the DNR. I come by way of North Dakota and South Dakota.
Okay.
Working in those states previously. And what my job is I'm the Red River Fisheries Specialist, which means whereas Nathan basically deals with an entire area and all the lakes within that, I deal only with the Red River and the tributaries flowing into the Red.
One stream,
Yeah, so
South Dakota, North Dakota, now you're hitting all the states fixing the Red River. We're the only one missing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, coming at it from all sides. Yeah, so this coming summer, we've really got a lot that's going to be happening on the Red River. First and foremost, we have our Channel Catfish Survey. And we do this every 5 years, and it's a collaborative effort with 3 different area offices. So you heard Nathan mention that there's an office in Fergus Falls, there's the Detroit Lakes office, and the Baudette office.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of those offices go out and survey channel catfish on the Red River because it's such a large system. You couldn't just have one area do it.
What means channel cat? Just because it's in a stream?
Yeah.
Instead of a lake? Okay.
Yeah, so the channel catfish is an actual species of fish.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, and what's interesting about the Red River is it's arguably one of the best channel cat fisheries in North America.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because our growing season is fairly short up here, and we have fairly cold water, the fish's metabolism is fairly slow. And you can think of this just like the engine in your car. If you run something slowly and take care of it, it's going to last a lot longer.
Highway miles versus city
Yeah,
miles.
exactly. So our channel cats live
Forever.
almost to 30 years.
Really?
Yeah, and if we were looking at channel cats in the southern United States, we'd be lucky to get to 8 or 9 years.
Interesting.
So it's a very, very unique system. So we get out there and we look at the size structure of the channel cats because we have trophy fish there.
Yeah, huge monsters.
Yeah, and so what we're doing is we're keeping an eye on that. We also have a Creole Survey, and this is the angler surveys that some of your listeners might be familiar with, where you have a DNR employee at the dock or maybe in a boat come and ask you, how's your fishing day going?
Okay.
How many fish have you caught? And just it's an opinion survey, but from it we're also getting harvest numbers.
Okay.
And so that's how we kind of do a 1-2 punch, if you will, on the river. We have the actual scientific survey that the areas are all helping with, and then we have the Creole Survey, which is looking at angler dynamics and their thoughts on the survey and how many fish they're keeping and what size those fish are.
Mm-hmm.
So we can get a very complete picture of how that fishery is going every 5 years. And that's kind of part of our routine monitoring on the Red River of the North.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have some more special things that are happening this year. And that's where it gets really exciting because I'm a fisheries scientist, and of course, this sort of thing gets me all kinds of jacked
No, I
up.
see your eyes are sparkling.
Yeah.
Settle down, Nick.
I'm
Settle
excited.
down.
Nathan's
No, it's
excited.
true.
We're all
It's
excited.
It's rubbing off on Dirk.
Yeah.
He's excited.
I want to get my fishing rod out again.
Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do, Dirk, this year is we're going to look at channel catfish genetics.
Okay.
Now, the Red River of the North technically starts in Breckenridge, Wahpeton area.
Yeah, I drive over that bridge all the time. There's a ton of fish houses there. I don't know, they bundle out. I was going to ask you that. So the Wadasu, I think, meets, and the
Yep.
Ottertail, those 3 actually the origin of the Red River, correct?
Yeah, well, and it's funny, if we actually go back in history, the Ottertail was named the Ottertail because we wanted to put dams on it. The Red River of the North was known as a navigable system back in the 1800s. So in order to have dams for mills on the otter tail, they renamed that stretch of the Red the Otter Tail.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so technically
This is already the Otter Tail.
Yeah.
This is already the Red River.
Exactly. But these days the Red River starts in Breckenridge
Yeah.
and flows all the way up into Lake Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And there's channel catfish in there that we mentioned earlier, and we've tagged those fish, and we know something about their movement within the system.
Really?
Yeah.
You
And
can put a tag on a fish?
yeah, exactly.
Not just on a bird?
Yeah, and we'll talk about tagging
yeah,
in just a second. I'll explain that all to you. But we've assumed that this population, based on the fish's movement, is all one interbreeding population of channel catfish from Breckenridge all the way to Lake Winnipeg.
Okay.
And part of the reason we think that is because we've seen tagged fish move several hundred miles annually within the Red River. It would not be unusual to see a channel catfish with a small home range or a small stretch of the river that it moves around in 1 year to be about 50 miles. A large home
Up and
range,
down, so to say.
Yeah.
That's like his neighborhood.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
A large home range for channel catfish in the Red would be about 350 miles.
Wow.
So you can see that these fish are just highly mobile. So we think they're all interbreeding. So it's just one big continuous population. There's no little subgroups. Think of it like a salmon run, where there's just a distinct population that runs to a stream at a particular time of year and then breeds. We don't think that's going on, but it's an assumption. We've never actually tested it. So as part of our monitoring this year, we're going to be taking just tissue samples from the fins of these fish, and then with the U of M, we'll be processing those to see, do we have one big population or do we have several small populations that just appear to be one big population?
So you do genetic testing and you can identify families?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So essentially what we're saying is, there might be just a
Tribes,
family
in a way.
that lives in the Otter Tail. There might be some just in this part of the Red. There might be some just up in the Red Lake River.
Really?
But we don't know, so we're going to go looking. And we also mentioned fish tagging a minute or two ago. And this is really exciting. I'm sure your listeners are aware of what a lake sturgeon is. A lake sturgeon is a swimming dinosaur. We can go back thousands of years in the fossil record and say, yep, that's a lake sturgeon. They've existed unchanged for a very long time. And earlier I mentioned dams. Over the years, the Red River Valley had many, many barriers constructed. And
like for the milling or such?
For the mills,
or
for
turbines.
railroads.
Okay.
We impounded water so we could draw water for steam engines
Oh.
and that sort of thing. And we also did it for flood control to some extent. But what we've learned through all these fish movement studies is that if you want your fish within the river to do well, you can't have the river chopped up into small segments. They need to be able to move so they can access that entire neighborhood that we talked about. So
Cage them in otherwise.
yeah, to some extent. And that caging in with the lake sturgeon combined with overfishing led to the complete extirpation of lake sturgeon. They were gone. For 125 years, we did not have lake sturgeon in the Red River.
Oh, but in some pockets. In the
No.
Red River were eliminated.
Yeah, completely gone.
Really?
Yeah, so they were only up in Canada and in the Rainy River.
Uh-huh.
So in the early 1990s, the DNR, along with a lot of different partners, the province of Manitoba, the Red Lake and White Earth Indian Nations, we also had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, North Dakota Game and Fish. We all got together and said, we need to reintroduce these and bring this population back. And we've been doing that very successfully for the past 30 years, partially by stocking, partially by removing dams and opening the river back up. And now what we're ready to do is tag these fish and see how they're moving within the system, because that'll help us monitor them into the future. And the way we do this, Dirk, is we essentially have listening stations set out in the Red River. It's like a microphone underwater. And we have going to be about 25 of them spaced all around the Red River. Then, when we go out in the spring and we sample the sturgeon, we essentially have a surgical unit on the bank of the river. And
You're implementing a little...
we're putting a little transmitter in those fish that essentially sends out Morse code. And based on the series of beeps that it sends out, we say, okay, that's fish A123.
And then you're listening to the...
Yeah.
Like, you're worse than the NSA.
If you're a lake sturgeon, maybe.
Wait till we get to the black helicopters
Yeah.
that we're going to use.
So really, so you're listening and they... Okay, now I'm the critical thinker here. So does the interference or the beeping, does it harm the behavior of the fish? Do we know?
No,
Or anything?
not at all.
Okay, I'm just...
Yeah, no, it's a
But
great question.
You probably checked that out.
Yeah, we do. And the other thing we're also very careful about is our surgical technique, because just like a veterinary surgeon, you wouldn't want to harm the animal that you're implanting.
No, it wouldn't.
So we actually bring up a researcher from the University in Nebraska who's very good at this, and he helps us with the surgery. And through all of this, what we get to discover is, are our sturgeon using the river the way we think they are? All these dam removal projects that we've done, are they benefiting things the way we think they are? And the sturgeon piece of this is just the newest part of this whole fish tracking in the Red River. This has been in place for about 5 years now, and we've been tracking channel catfish movement. We've been tracking common carp movement, freshwater drum, as well as bigmouth buffalo movement. And bigmouth buffalo are another one that's just absolutely fascinating. They're the largest of the sucker species. You may have seen them lately. Someone caught a bright orange one. It was in the news. We've also learned that these get to be over 100 years old.
Really?
We didn't think they got that old. Previously, we thought sturgeon held all the age records. They can get up to 150.
Yeah, I knew that they can get really old.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're looking at fish movement throughout the entire basin to get an idea of, okay, we're improving the habitat. How's that improving the fishery? Are they able to use it? Are they able to get to their breeding grounds and then back to the river to feed, get to their overwintering grounds? And it's all just extremely fascinating how these fish are using space.
Well, yeah, no, I hear you. Now, one question that I have is, we are obviously investing a lot of effort and probably also a lot of money, which is fine. But now, what's the gain for humankind? Like, if we, what do we apply if we look in science? Like, what does it help us? Like, do we protect water quality? I don't know. Do we, like, what do we, what is our learning then afterwards? Do we apply it to different animals? I'm just curious, like, because you're a scientist, what is our overall achievement goal from the knowledge in 10 years?
Well, what's really neat is the Red River is absolutely unique in North America in that with the return of the lake sturgeon, we have not lost a single native species that lives in the red.
Okay.
So think about that on the landscape. How many times do you hear, you know, we change things, it's declining, we're losing species? In the Red River, we can honestly be quite proud of ourselves and say we're taking actions to improve habitat to preserve all those native species that are there and still present. So that's kind of from the environmental, moralistic pat on the back standpoint. But then there's also the economic side of it. You know, these fisheries are a boon to the small towns near them. When we remove dams, what we do is we open up the upstream section for these fish that move a great distance to come back into those stretches of the river, and all of a sudden your city park that had a stream through it where people couldn't fish, now people can go down to the local county park, and previously they may have been catching bullheads, now they're catching walleyes, sauger, and these riverine species that have access to those stretches of the stream again. We also, with the reintroduction of the lake sturgeon, are hoping to reestablish that population. And if you look at a lot of the small communities up on the Rainy River, they benefit enormously economically from the lake sturgeon fishery up there. Well, someday wouldn't it be wonderful to have that back in the Red River and have all those fishermen coming to target those? Because right now it's only a catch and release season because we're still in the midst of reestablishing the population. But how neat would it be to have that in your local economy, as well as a lot of the lake resources that people perhaps are more familiar with?
So by tracking the movements, we can just nurture the growth, or like,
Yeah.
I mean,
well, what we're doing is we're looking at, what habitats do these species need to reproduce, grow, thrive, and survive. And if we can identify that in some parts of the basin, well, we can then directly apply that knowledge to other portions of the basin and attempt to replicate our successes, as well as learn from those areas that are failures.
Oh, can we maybe identify that they stick around in an area that they really like?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they like find a spot and then they live there for the 5 years, maybe, and then we say, oh, this is a fruitful.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are learning something by knowing where they are and where they stay.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a lot like when we track animals on the landscape.
Yeah, like birds now.
Exactly. Everyone's familiar with
I don't know why they do it, but they
bird tracking
do.
studies, or say deer, or even the big game over in Africa.
Yeah.
The way we learn about the habitat that things need is we need to know where they move and when.
Oh,
So this is the same thing with fish.
Right. Okay. You just mentioned that the Red River is such a unique stream, right? Isn't it the only north-running river in the United States? Or is it one of very few? It
One of
definitely
very
runs
few.
north, right?
Yeah, one of very few.
Is there a correlation? Like everything that goes north is better than goes. I don't know. Like not that. No. But like if it's north running, I don't know. Is there different gravity, or is there different?
Nope. It's just
mineral?
simply
I
an
don't know.
accident of geology.
An accident.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an accident. Maybe I think it's purposeful, but I don't know. I'm asking.
No, what it is just very simply water flows downhill.
Sure.
And it slopes all the way from Breckenridge all the way to Hudson Bay.
Yeah.
So that continental divide, that is why it flows north.
Yeah.
The slope is almost imperceptible in the Red River Valley. It's one of the flattest flowing streams in the country.
Is it?
But it does in fact slope north, and that's why it flows north.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Yeah. Okay. So we have a lot going on. The tracking, science in the fields, but yeah. What else is happening?
Well, we can talk one more science project if you want.
Yeah, if you have the time.
Oh, absolutely. This one is a collaboration between the Minnesota DNR and Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development.
Okay.
That's kind of our counterparts in that province.
Yeah.
And what we're doing here gets a little space-agey.
Okay.
You have inner ear bones, correct?
Yeah.
Fish have a similar structure. It's kind of their ear bone. We call it an otolith.
Don't they have sensors on the side of them?
They do.
Okay.
But the way they orient themselves up, down, right, and left in the water column is with these otoliths. Imagine a hula hoop, if you will, with a rock in the bottom of it. And as you tilt that hoop, that rock is going to change position, right?
Sure.
That's how a fish knows what's upright, up, down, left, and right, is that otolith within that canal that would be represented by our hula hoop and our rock.
So if it's sideways, it knows it's sideways?
Exactly. That's why you don't see fish swimming upside down in the water column.
Because they have, okay, that's their measure.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's their inner ear that gives them stability.
Okay.
So if we take that otolith out of a fish, we can cut a very thin cross-section of it and look at it under magnification, and it's going to look exactly like a tree ring.
Mm-hmm.
Think of how you can age a tree on a stump.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the same thing with this inner ear bone of a fish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we age fish all across the United States.
Mm-hmm.
What you can also do is take a small laser and shoot those tree rings on the fish's otolith. And you'll get a small wisp of smoke when you do this.
Fish is dead, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Fish is long
Fish
gone
is
at this
already-
point.
Okay, it's open on the table, okay?
Yep. So we've taken the otolith,
Yeah.
we've sectioned it,
okay.
we've aged it, looking at those tree ring-like structures.
Okay. And then you shoot it.
Now
No.
we shoot. Yeah,
we're shooting with
we
a
do.
laser.
We do. Now we
Okay,
shoot
you
it with a
point
laser.
with a laser, yeah. You
Yeah,
point,
right at
touch.
those tree rings.
Yeah.
And that little wisp of smoke can be read by a mass spectrometer, kind of like the CSI crime shows where they're trying to identify what is this mysterious substance.
Really?
Yeah, so from that smoke, we now have,
Oh, lead or like ingredients that they ate?
yeah, you can do that.
What they
But
have
what
been, what?
more it is the traces of the water chemistry where it was at
Right.
that age. So it allows us to
You
go
pointed, like,
exactly. We can go back in time on the fish's location. And so
Sure.
what we're doing is we can say, okay, we have a map of the water
wow.
chemistry of the Red River.
he traveled like 1,500 miles.
Yeah, and we can say, okay, here is the dead center of the otolith. That's the beginning of
Yeah.
that ear bone when the fish was a fingerling.
Mm-hmm.
Where was it born? And
Well,
we
you need to have a database of all the waters around you and need
Yeah.
to have those chemicals from 1990 and 2000. Do you have water sample? Like, do you know that? Is
Yeah.
that a database?
Yeah, we have a map of the water chemistry, and the water chemistry, quite remarkably, is stable through time.
Really?
Yeah, and it's a function of the geology that the streams flow through. So they pick up certain trace elements based on the soil and the rock over which they flow.
Okay.
And that's how you separate different streams from each other. So what we can do is, let's take a sauger, because that's a really interesting sport fish for a lot of Minnesota anglers. We can take that otolith out, we can age the fish. Okay, it's a 3-year-old sauger. But where was that sauger born? Well, let's use this approach. It's called otolith microchemistry. Let's shoot it with a laser right at the middle of that otolith from when it was a fingerling, and reading that chemical signature of the smoke say, okay, well, we can say with 90% probability that this is a Canadian sauger. This came from Lake Winnipeg. Or we could say, oh, this came from the Assiniboine River out on the Canadian prairie. Or we can say, oh, this came from the Ottertail River. And it's a fascinating way to look back in time at, okay, where is the natal origin? Where were these fish born? And again, that gets to what we were talking about earlier, the habitat and the connectivity of these streams, and it being relatively important. Because if we say, 75% of the fish that we looked at came from this location, well, what made that location so special? Because if we randomly sample the fish population, well, we should get fish from everywhere, but if there's a strange concentration, something very interesting and very important is happening at that spot, and we probably should know what it is. So A, we can protect it, and then B, we can try and replicate it to enhance fisheries around the region. So it's a really unique approach, and like I said, we're collaborating not only with partners around the state, but also internationally with the Canadians to do this.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, really fascinating.
Hope we didn't lose you there, Dirk.
No, I want to see the lab now. That is really.
So we just need 100,000 for the laser.
Oh!
That's all we need.
We're fundraising now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, no, where we get it is a lot of geology departments have this already.
Okay.
So it's just cross-pollination
Yeah.
academically, making more efficient use of taxpayer dollars.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's really fascinating. But no, I like to hear the conclusion that, like, okay, we have overly many fish from this area, so then we zoom into like what caused the fertility, or why is there so many, and then if we replicate that environment and then we grow. I mean, now there's a science conclusion. Now there's actually makes sense. We just don't create data. We actually read it and apply it then.
Exactly.
That's something that I was trying to follow.
Well, and Canada has a major interest in this because they are seeing some issues with their walleye and sauger populations in the Winnipeg River. And so it's important to note that the Red River is an international resource, and there's things that can happen in the States that affects Canada and Lake Winnipeg and vice versa. You know, especially if we're seeing fish that are moving back and forth across this international border. So as we could say.
Trespassing.
Yeah, I mean.
Do they have passports?
Yeah. Fish have no borders, and no passports.
No, but yeah, of course. You see, I mean, like now, but this goes. This is a pliable example, but that's how our doings affect also our neighbors. I mean, we think about it, but not often enough. And now, even as sportsmen and fishermen, we say, hey, wait a second. Whatever wave we make, it has an outcome in other places too. So it's not just us, like we are a community, like whether we are fishermen or world citizens, and collaboration with our neighbors to secure habitat. I mean, that is a perfect example of working together.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why so much work has already been done with catfish and all these other fish species, is that Canada was they were interested to know how international are these fish populations.
Yeah.
And so they've been working with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to do a lot of work, especially with catfish, to see how much are they moving and how old these fish are, just to gather baseline information about them so that we can help manage them better.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. No, you didn't lose me at all. I was quiet for once because I was really interested.
I know. No.
Well, but I think you have to head back to your offices. You mentioned, and there's another appointment already. So I'm very happy you were able to squeeze this in for our fishery report and DNR update. And then you mentioned as early as late March or probably mid-April, we will be harvesting again at Dunton Locks, and I'm sure we have that on our schedule. And thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Dirk.
And you have a good weekend ahead.
You too.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was already our newest episode of the Lake Life Weekend podcast. We sure hope you enjoyed it. Tune in again next week with another great guest and updates. Always check out our website, lakelifeweekend.com, and if you have some comments, please feel free to email us at hello@lakelifeweekend.com, and you have a wonderful weekend ahead.